8 stone steps drop down a mountainside in Las Alpujarras, and at the bottom of them, past a wall of fig trees, there's a terrace where you can watch the entire Lanjaron Valley turn gold around 7 in the evening, the light catching the terraced hillsides until the whole valley looks like it's been dipped in honey. 50,000 euros. $57,000. For a house with that view. Say nothing else for a second. Let that sit because it's going to come back later. I went through hundreds of listings to put this list together, comparing photos against floor plans, against fine print until my eyes hurt, and the rule was simple. No projects, no ruins, no great potential doing a lot of heavy lifting in the description. Actually move into, that's the bar. But I'll tell you now. One of these 8 has a flaw so specific that if you miss it in the listing, you don't just lose money, you lose the ability to ever fully fix it. Keep that in the back of your mind because I'm not going to remind you again until the very end. We're starting in Lanjaron, a small spa town tucked into the southern slopes of the Sierra Nevada, famous across Spain for its natural springs and its wild water-throwing festival every June, where the entire town basically declares war on staying dry for one afternoon a year. It's whitewashed, steep-streeted, and surrounded by terraced farmland that's been worked the same way for centuries. This is the gateway to Las Alpujarras, the kind of place people retire to, specifically because nothing about it has hurried in 50 years. And honestly, that's most of the appeal. 50,000 euros? $57,000? That's the number, and now, let's talk about what it buys. This first one is Finca Peru, and I want to start here because it's the most honest place to start. The exterior is what sells it before anything else. A stone finca tucked into the Alpujarra Mountains, a 20-minute walk from Lanjaron and its shops, its bars, its actual town life, not some isolated farmhouse. You'd need a car just to feel human again. Inside is small and unpretentious, a kitchen and a cozy lounge on the ground floor, and upstairs, one bedroom with a view that, and I mean this, most luxury hotels are charging $400 a night for. The build itself is 40 square meters. That's a little over 430 square feet. So think one tight, efficient floor plan, not a sprawling layout. The kind of space where everything has a purpose and nothing's wasted. A garden shaded by mature trees sits below. The kind of spot where you put down 2 chairs and don't move for a few hours. Where the only real decision you have to make is whether to open a second bottle of wine. Now here's the honest part, and I'm putting it early on purpose because if I buried it at the end, you'd have every right to be annoyed with me. The building isn't currently registered on the deeds. I'm not a lawyer, and the listing doesn't elaborate. But that's not a small detail, and we'll come back to exactly why later. There's also a 5-minute walk from the nearest parking, which sounds minor, until you're carrying groceries uphill in August, sweating through your shirt, wondering why you didn't pack lighter. And the best part is, even with both of those caveats sitting right there in plain view, not hidden, not glossed over, this is still a 1-bedroom stone house with a postcard view for under 60 grand. Remember this one, not because it's the best deal here because of what it's missing. Property 2 flips the whole approach, so let's deal with the hard part first. 68,000 euros, $78,000. This farmhouse near Durkal is reached by a high mountain road. 4 feet border 4 required, no negotiating that. And it's about an hour from Niguelas, a whitewashed village wedged into the foothills below the Sierra Nevada, known mostly for olive oil, and for being the kind of place that barely makes it onto maps, let alone tourist itineraries. There's no electricity. Water comes from the Durkal River, and solar panels aren't optional, they're the plain. I'm not sure what backup system most owners run out here. Wow, the listing doesn't say. But if you're picturing a quiet evening with the grid completely absent, no streetlights, no hum of appliances, just you and the mountains, that's the actual proposition. Here's what that buys you. A farmhouse built in 2008, genuinely in excellent condition, not described as excellent, built that way and kept that way with 81 square meters of living space, around 870 square feet. 2 bright bedrooms, a full bathroom, laid out with more care than the price tag suggests. Somebody clearly thought about how the light moves through this place before they finished it. Outside, Mediterranean light and mountain views in every direction, the kind of setting where breakfast outside isn't an event. It's just what you do now, every single morning, without thinking twice about it. If total disconnection from the grid is a deal breaker, this isn't your house. If it's the actual goal, if you've spent years imagining what it would feel like to genuinely unplug, the math on what $78,000 buys you off grid starts to look very different. Quick gut check before we go further, because I don't want you thinking these first 2 are flukes. They're not random listings, they're the entry tier of this whole list, and what they're trading is convenience for privacy and raw land. Everything that follows gets easier to actually live in, but rarely cheaper for what you get. Keep that trade in mind as we go, because it's going to show up again and again as we work through the rest of these. And speaking of actually living somewhere, let's talk logistics for a second, because that's usually where the daydream meets reality. Take a village like Taberno, which we're about to visit, a quiet farming town in the Almeria Highlands, where the landscape opens up into dry, sun-bleached hills, and on a clear day you can actually see the Mediterranean glinting in the distance from the village itself. A thin silver line on the horizon that reminds you the coast is closer than it feels. It's 15 minutes to a town with a pharmacy, a health center, a supermarket, fiber optic internet. The regional hospital sits about 15 minutes past that in Huercal Overa, so call it half an hour total if something actually serious comes up. Not instant, but not the kind of distance that should scare you off either. Beaches are roughly half an hour out in the other direction. That's not luxury infrastructure, that's normal life, just slower and with better views. You can run errands, pick up a prescription, grab groceries, and still be home before your coffee's cold. This is the part of moving abroad that nobody puts in the highlight reel, and it's exactly the part that determines whether you actually stay. Here's the thing. Nobody puts in the listing description. Buying property in Spain as a non-EU buyer involves a few extra steps most people don't budget time for, starting with getting an NIE number, a tax identification number you genuinely cannot complete a purchase without. It's not complicated, but it takes longer than people expect, especially from abroad. The actual tip: start that process before you've fallen in love with a specific house, not after. Your notaire can walk you through residency implications early. Ask before you're emotionally attached to a deadline. And this is exactly the kind of thing I want you to check before you fall in love with a house. The stuff that doesn't show up in the photos or the headline price. That's why I created The Real Cost of Buying a Cheap House in Europe, a complete 180-page guide to help you understand what you're really paying before you make an offer, region by region, broken down so it actually makes sense even if you've never bought property abroad before. If you're serious about buying in Europe, this guide could save you thousands by helping you avoid the wrong property and the hidden costs most buyers miss. You can get it through the link in the description or just scan the QR code on screen. Don't buy the dream blind. Okay, back to the houses, because Taberno earns its spot. 69,000 euros, $79,000, and this one isn't about price first proving anything. It's about what's already done, what you're not going to spend another cent fixing. Inside, a wood-burning kitchen, 2 large bedrooms across 77 square meters, roughly 828 square feet, big windows pulling in mountain views, and the whole thing described as immaculate and ready to move into. No asterisks, no needs work. The village itself has a bakery, a school, a municipal pool, fiber internet, a bank. It's not a museum, it's real life, fully running, with people already living it, kids riding bikes down the same streets you'd be walking, neighbors who will know your name within a month. This is the version of easy you've been waiting for this whole video. It's also not the best deal on this list, just the smoothest one so far. Now here's a property that wins on something totally different. Size, plain and simple. €72,000, $83,000. This finca sits just outside Benigànim, a small town in the Valencia countryside known for its pine forests, its almond groves, and its proximity, relatively speaking, to both the coast and Valencia city itself, close enough that a day trip to the beach is genuinely realistic. Not some aspirational claim in a listing. The plot here is just over 23,000 square meters, which works out to roughly 249,000 square feet. That's not a typo. That's acres of pine-shaded land for the price of a used car back home. The kind of number that makes you do the math twice just to make sure. The house itself is modest. 75 square meters, about 807 square feet, one story, with a covered terrace, a living room with a fireplace, 2 bedrooms. There's a pool, though it has no filtration system, so budget for that conversation before you start picturing lazy afternoons in it. It's a feature, not a finished amenity. No electricity here either. Irrigation water only. Solar required. Same story as Durkal. So if you're sensing a pattern in this price range, you're not wrong. One small honest note. The listing photos are AI enhanced, which the agency discloses up front. I'd treat that as a reason to ask more questions, not fewer, and maybe request a few unedited shots before you get too attached to anything you've seen on screen. Here's a reframe worth sitting with. The cheapest house on this list isn't necessarily the best deal, and if you've been mentally ranking these by price alone, it's worth pausing that instinct for a second. Once you start measuring dollars per square meter of actual land, this finca quietly becomes one of the strongest plays here, even though 3 other houses cost less. Quick question, and I genuinely want you thinking about this one, not just nodding along. Would you take a rougher, steeper path to your front door in exchange for 6,000 square meters that are entirely yours? €75,000? $86,000 gets you exactly that, because that's Lenteji, a tiny village clinging to a hillside in the Granada province, closer to goat trails than to highways, and about as far from a tourist itinerary as Spain gets. The kind of place that doesn't show up unless you're specifically looking for it. No postcard fame, no crowds, just the mountains doing their own thing. Access is via a maintained path that gets noticeably steeper near the top. Fine in a regular car most of the way, slower going for the last stretch. What you get for it is land, real land, room for animals, room to actually grow something, with the option to live there full time or just disappear there on weekends when the rest of life gets too loud and you need somewhere with no Wi-Fi excuse not to disconnect. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 46 square meters of house, close to 500 square feet, sitting on a huge plot, your own small mountain. This next one earns its spot on pure space alone. €78,000, $89,000 for a townhouse in Tozar, a tiny stone-built hamlet within the municipality of Moclin, perched in the hills northwest of Granada City, and known for not much beyond its quiet and its views, which honestly is the entire appeal for the kind of buyer this list is for. Somebody who's tired of noise being the default. 212 square meters here, which is close to 2,280 square feet, 4 bedrooms, sitting on a corner of a stone-paved street with valley views stretching out in 2 directions, the kind of vantage point that makes you stop and just look for a minute before you even unlock the door. Here's the genuinely unusual part. It has 2 separate entrances on 2 different streets, which means it could function as 2 homes, or 1 big one, depending what you want, or even a place for family to stay independently when they visit without anyone tripping over anyone else. The upper floor is already renovated and fully livable, move-in ready on its own if you wanted to start there and tackle the rest later, no rush. No pressure to finish everything in year 1. The lower floor, the part leading to the large terrace, needs interior work. Though structurally the house is sound from the outside in, no shortcuts taken on the bones of it, no cracks in the walls that would make you nervous. What's basically 2 townhouses, wearing 1 address, in a village where the loudest sound most evenings is somebody's dog barking 2 streets over. Let me put this next one in perspective with a number you already know. A studio apartment in a lot of major cities rents for more per year than this entire house costs to buy, which is worth sitting with for a second before you scroll past it. €80,000, $89,000. We're heading north now, to the outskirts of León, a historic city in northwestern Spain, known for its Gothic cathedral, its cooler climate compared to the south, and a slower, less touristy pace of life than most of the places we've visited so far. This is a different Spain entirely, more stone and seasons, less sun-bleached coastline, the kind of region where you'll actually want a proper coat in January. A 2-bedroom townhouse near León, 30 minutes from the city center, with a private patio, a vegetable garden, and a genuinely spacious detached garage, with 64 square meters of living space, about 689 square feet. Property tax here runs about €100 a year. Garbage collection, drainage, waste, all itemized, all under €50 combined. The kind of transparency you don't always get in a listing, where most of the time you're left guessing at the actual cost of ownership until you've already signed. It needs renovation. The listing's upfront about that, but the layout's efficient and the bones are solid. Nothing structural to worry about, just cosmetic work and time. The patio alone has room to demolish an old kitchen wall and open the whole space up into something genuinely livable. The kind of project you could realistically finish in a single summer if you're motivated. Almost an unfair amount of property for the number on the listing. Last one. And this is where that detail from the very beginning comes back. €80,000, $92,000. And here's what makes it the right house to end on. It's clean. This townhouse sits in Periana, a traditional white village in the Axarquía region of Malaga province, an area known for its terraced hillsides, its olive oil production, and its proximity to the Costa del Sol without any of the coastal price tag. Close enough for a beach day, far enough to never hear a jet ski. It's the kind of inland Andalusian town that still runs on its own rhythm. Markets, fiestas, neighbors who actually know each other. The slower social fabric that's increasingly rare even in Spain. The kind of place where the bartender knows your order by the second week. The house itself is traditional Andalusian style straight through. 3 bedrooms, across 2 floors, a fully fitted kitchen with an open fireplace, a private balcony off the master bedroom, a sunny terrace for the third, the kind of layout where every room earns its place. No unregistered deeds, no 4 only access, no missing electricity. Just a well-maintained village house in a town known for its olive oil and its mountain views, ready for someone to actually move in without a single asterisk attached to the listing. Remember Lancheron, that first finca with a gorgeous mountain view for €50,000, $57,000? The detail I told you to hold on to was the unregistered deeds. That's not a paperwork formality you handle after closing. Depending on the situation, it can affect your ability to mortgage the property, insure it properly, or prove the exact boundary of what you own. And it's the kind of thing that can take months, sometimes longer to resolve, if it resolves cleanly at all. Periana is the answer to that mystery. Same region, similar charm, same price range, just with paperwork that's already done. That's the actual lesson buried in this whole list. The cheapest price and the safest price are rarely the same house. So if you're sorting through all 8 of these, Durkal is the one for total privacy, off-grid and unreachable by anything but a 4x4, the kind of property you buy when you genuinely want to disappear for a while. Periana is the most turnkey, the one you could move a suitcase into next month and not think about a punch list for years. And Benigànim is the one for land, if space matters more to you than square footage of house. If what you actually want is acreage and quiet and room to plant something that'll still be there in 20 years. Solid properties, all of them at the time of this roundup, but they're not interchangeable, and that's kind of the point. Each one is solving a slightly different problem, and the trick is figuring out which problem is actually yours. Honest verdict, the kind I'd actually say to a friend over coffee. No sales pitch attached to it. Buy the paperwork as carefully as you buy the view, because the view doesn't change and the paperwork can ruin everything if you don't. Tell me in the comments, are you the privacy and land type or the walk-in ready type? There's usually no in-between once you've actually thought it through. I'm genuinely curious which one wins more votes. And if this kind of honest, no-nonsense property roundup is useful to you, subscribing means I keep doing the unglamorous work of reading hundreds of listings, cross-checking the fine print, and weeding out the ones that aren't what they claim to be, so you don't have to.